This conference will now be recorded.
Okay, so my first question is, can you tell us a little bit about yourself and how you became interested in the issue of bullying?
Yes, so my name is Rebecca Burd, and I am the one of the directors of Speak Life and Bullying, and one of the writers of Speak Life and Bullying the musical. And we started this all the way back in 2001, and it actually came from a meeting that we attended that was on Long Island, which is where we're from. And it was just a meeting of different people that were working with young people in all different areas around Long Island. And that particular day, they played a audio clip by a gentleman named Frank Peretti, and he is an author, and he typically writes works of fiction. And this particular one was his first work of nonfiction, and it was the story of how he had been horrifically bullied all throughout elementary school, right into middle school. And he had some physical disfigurements, and that's why kids chose to pick on him. And this was about 2 years post Columbine, well, maybe even just a year post Columbine when he wrote the book. And so at that time, up until all of us as a country experienced Columbine and saw and witnessed, it wasn't that it was the first school shooting, it was just the first publicized school shooting. And of course, we learned a lot about the students that were involved, and we learned about their past and their history. It sort of erupted a brand new conversation around the subject of bullying. But up until then, most people saw bullying, and we were taught back when we were in school that bullying was truly just a rite of passage. It was something every child had to go through. And really, they would speak to the child that was being bullied and say things like, you just need to be stronger. You just need to, know how to withstand the things people are saying or doing to you. Trust me, it'll pass. You're going to get through it. And so that was the messaging around bullying. And so in this book, Frank said something that nobody was saying. And that was that bullying truly is abuse at its core. And if a child experiences it over and over and over again, it's going to cause long-term mental health issues for that child well into adulthood. And I think it just took us all, aback in that room because every single adult in that room said, yes, that is exactly what it is. And why have we been talking about it this other way for so long? And so we were all so moved in the room. I don't think there was a dry eye. And when my husband and I got up from the table, we went to the gentleman running the meeting and said to him, listen, like, we can't just walk out. We need to do something. And he said, well, you are the artists. Go do something about it. And those words, literally those few words, changed the outcome of our life. And we went
Mhm.
back. We had a small little team of volunteer staff at the time, and we wrote the first rendition of Speak Life and Bullying the musical. And that's where it all began.
Wow, that's a really amazing story. My next question is, how did your experiences with bullying or your view of bullying impact your current work in your non-for-profit?
I think that's a great question because I think we've realized over the course of the last 20 years of work, from that origination of writing the show into what ended up being 15 different tours, live tours of us taking that show into schools across the country. We've been to about 375 schools live and seen about 375,000 students live. And we'll talk a little more later about where we're at right now. But through those experiences, what we've learned in talking with students across the country over several decades is truly that every child sits in the seat of both usually the bully, the bullied, or the bystander at some point in their life. And
Mhm.
nobody wants to identify or nobody wants to say, oh, hey, I'm the bully. But if we're all being truly honest with ourselves, we can say, hey, there's been times that I've used my words or I've used my actions. Maybe I thought I was just self protecting, but they really hurt somebody else. And I think we all identify in that way. And so as I look back at my story from high school and how I personally identify with it, I would say more often than not, I was the bystander. I was seeing it happen. I went to a very small private school. There's only 25 kids in my class. And
Mhm.
so every genre of what you could imagine happening was happening just like a big high school, just in a condensed 25 student ratio.
Mhm.
And I know that child. In fact, I could tell you his name to this day. I know the child that was being targeted in our little 25 student class. And way too often, I look back on those stories and those moments and think, I just sat by. I just watched it happen. I didn't know how to use my voice. I didn't know how to stand up. I didn't know how to speak life into the situation. and affect
Hmm.
change. So I think my personal story has a lot of regret involved because I wish I could go back and I wish I could change that. And part of why I know that this is my life's work and why I'm called to do this is because empowering other students to let them know that their voice does matter, that their voice can make a difference. Never stand by, never just let it happen in front of you and not
Hmm.
stand on behalf of that other child. For me, that's how I've turned a personal experience into something that I absolutely love to do, knowing now that there's so many other students, hopefully, that we can save from that same abuse by hopefully an army of us standing up and being the ones who
Yes.
stand in that gap.
Yes, definitely. My next question is, what factors do you believe contribute to bullying? And what role do you think mental health plays in bullying or being bullied?
Man, I think there's so many factors. We could probably be here all day discussing them because I think they stem from each of our personal experiences. You know, many people are replicating what they see happening in their home, whether
Hmm.
it's happening directly to them or they see it in interpersonal relationships that are going on inside their families. Many people, they're acting out of their own pain. I think that's probably the top reason that we see bullying is that
Hmm.
typically, most often, it's our pain turned sideways. And instead of knowing how to actually handle it or how to walk it out or how to deal with it, it ends up coming out in our actions. We end up actually becoming a version of ourselves that we don't even recognize.
Hmm.
And more often than not, I don't even think it's purposeful. I don't think most children wake up in the morning and think, who am I going to go hurt today at school? Like that
Hmm.
is just not how I think bullying plays out. More often than not, it's something that takes place out of a person's pain or out of a person's survival mode, feeling that if I do not stay on top and whatever it takes to stay on top, whoever I have to step on, whoever I have to push down, I
Hmm.
have to stay on top because on top is where I will survive. And if I allow myself any other position, I'm going to get crushed. And so it becomes a very survival mechanism. So I think, and that all, either side of those things, all stems back to personal pain. So I
Hmm.
think that more often than not, that is the number one cause of why we see this happening. And then I also think when we're younger and when we're discovering ourselves, especially late elementary school into middle school, there's so much self discovery going on. We're so formidable in those seasons of our lives
Hmm.
that we don't even know ourselves. And so oftentimes there's actions and things that will come out of us that we're learning and we're tripping
Hmm.
up and we're making mistakes in the process of learning ourselves and learning how to interact with others. And I think a lot of that also can lead to the bullying that takes place. So
Hmm.
that was the first part of your question. What was the second part again?
Was what role do you think mental health plays in bullying or being bullied?
Yes, wow. I think that that's huge because I think mental health goes back to the pain that each of us do carry on a daily basis. And I think,
Hmm.
we all have a story. And that's one of the things we talk about in the musical is really the power of curiosity, of wondering about somebody's shadow story, wondering about the thing that maybe we don't know about them, that thing
Hmm.
that may be going on at home, that thing that may be going on behind the scenes, a physical thing they might be dealing with, a mental thing they might be dealing with at home, just the difficulties that we can all face. And so we're each carrying around that shadow
Hmm.
story. We each carry that. And for many of us, we have support. We have great parents. We have great infrastructure in our home. We have aunts, uncles, great teachers, great people pouring into us. And so we're able to navigate that on a really, in a really positive way. We may trip up along the way, but we're able to navigate. For many students, they don't have those support systems and mechanisms built in around them. And so
Yes.
when the mental health starts going in the wrong direction, it can go down the track at lightning speed. And students
Hmm.
suddenly find themselves in the midst of deep depression and sadness and anxiety and several different difficult emotions that they're trying to navigate. And I think that bullying plays an enormous part in that because when a child is in self discovery, and then bullying enters their story, they're
Hmm.
already dealing with everything else they've been dealt up to that point, which for any child on any given day is a lot. Throw
Yes.
bullying into that scenario, and the mental health can fall in a negative direction very, very, very quickly.
Yes, definitely. My next question is, how did you work through any problems you encountered in starting your not-for-profit and come to realize what was correct and what was not, and how to create something with such a positive mission?
Wow. I think we're always learning. So I am 20 something years into the process. And especially as we're bringing this new offering to schools in this new format, man, I'm learning every single day. And I think the most powerful thing I could say to someone who's thinking about, hey, how can I make a difference? How could I start something that could make a difference? Is number one, nobody accomplishes anything until they're willing to take that first step and willing to take that risk. So you know what? You won't know everything up front. And you know what? You will make mistakes. And both of those things are so okay. And they're totally human. And in fact, if those two things weren't true, you would be superhuman because we all are learning and we all are going to trip up along the way. And really, I think it's about navigating obstacles. So as we grow, and in this organization for me, like as we've grown it, we've confronted obstacles all along the way, whether they were financial obstacles, fundraising obstacles. How do you get into a school? How do you
Mm-hmm.
get in touch with that principal? How do you present your program to them in a way that you can show them what makes it unique and what makes it effective
Mm-hmm.
with students? All of those things are things that we've had to navigate daily. And
Yes.
sometimes we're strategizing on the spot to solve problems. We used to be live in schools. Goodness, man, we were strategizing all the whole day we'd be in the school. It was always trying to navigate a time change or somebody got injured on stage or,
Mm-hmm.
you never knew what was going to happen. And so I think the thing that I've learned along the way is that the more flexible we can be, the more
Mm-hmm.
committed to learning, committed to growing, and the more grace we can give to ourselves to allow ourselves to make some mistakes, trip up, and to learn and not allow shame and all of those other judgment or even what other people might say looking in to affect the long term. If I had listened to all the voices around me over the last 20 years that have told us, you guys gave it a really good try, you should probably just stop now. And I had major health issues and they're like, Rebecca, you have big health issues. Just stop. It's too hard. If I had listened to that, we wouldn't be here today. So I
Mm-hmm.
would also say always trust your gut and the wise counsel and people that are around you that know you the best, and reach out to people who have gone before you. We have had so much help from
Mm-hmm.
people that have gone before us that have been incredibly successful in what they've done. And they have certainly helped us navigate some of the things along the way. But I think that the best skill that you can have
Mm-hmm.
is determination and the willingness to not quit when the roadblock comes, because I can guarantee you two things. It's going to be hard. There's going to be roadblocks. That
Mm-hmm.
in any great venture, especially when you're trying to do something good in the world, it's going to be hard. But that's okay
Mm-hmm.
because we're doing something that can affect enormous amounts of change in the lives of other people. And I am willing to take on the hardship and the difficulty when I know that the outcome could really bring change for a child. And so I think it's just knowing your purpose and knowing your calling and staying grounded in that, and weathering the storms
Mm-hmm.
because they'll come, but you'll get to the other side.
Yes, definitely. I know you mentioned earlier how like all the things going on in someone's life can end up like compounding until someone like just can't take it anymore. So what do you think are some healthy coping mechanisms for any feelings of aggression or anger someone may have? And when do you think it's necessary to start reaching out for help?
Wonderful question. I think that the biggest thing I could say is to talk, to find that safe space, find that safe person. And I would also recommend that it wouldn't necessarily be a peer, but it would be someone who's gone before you, just like we talked about when you're navigating a new venture. You go to people who have been successful. And sometimes our peers can be really great sounding boards, but they're going through it too. They're
Mhm.
struggling too. And so sometimes they're not going to have the resources or the tools or the things to give you. And that's where we can trust the people that have gone before and have gotten the training and have been through those processes. And so I would say the number one thing is whether it's your parent that you can find that trust in, and sometimes you need to say to your parent, hey, I need more, and be
Mhm.
really honest with them. I've had my son come to me and say, can I get more? Can I get some counseling in this? I need some help in this
Mhm.
area. And no parent should ever look at a child and think anything more than thank you. Thank you for being open. Thank you for asking 100%.
Mhm.
What can I do? How can I help? The most dangerous thing we can do is take hard emotions and stuff them down. and just
Yes.
internalize them, because it's like a darkness, and it's like we're stuffing them into a dark place, and that darkness can become, it can literally just overtake us. But
Yes.
when you bring someone else into the situation, it's as if you've turned on the light in the room. And
Hmm.
that little light, even if it's just a little glimmer in the corner, can be the hope and the knowledge that we need to lighten up that whole space in our life, in our heart, in our soul, whatever is truly hurting.
Hmm.
There's help, there's resources. And so be willing to go and just turn the nightlight on, turn that little glimmer of light on in the corner of the room. I promise you that the smallest step can make the biggest difference, but never suffer alone. Never suffer alone. There's always hope and there's always help. And I think as far as those hard emotions, I think when we go to those people and we find the ones who really know, they can give us those coping tools. I'm still learning. I'm 47 years
Hmm.
old, and I just went through a coaching over the last 3 months for myself, because I've come
Hmm.
through a lot from my chronic illness, and I know that I have to navigate all the emotions that came with that suffering and that experience. And so
Yes.
the best way I could cope with that is to go to someone who's knowledgeable and have them help me get the tools that I need, so I know what to do with those emotions and I know how to work with them, because they're not bad. Nobody should feel shameful that we might feel things like anger or sadness.
Hmm.
It's about, what do we do with it? Where do we point it? And how do we process it?
Yes, definitely. My next question is, what are some of the signs to look out for if someone is being bullied or bullying others? And how do you realize what's happening to you is not it's bullying that's being overt and that you would benefit from reaching out for help?
Yeah, I think John Maxwell actually gives a great definition of bullying, and he describes it as um, a situation in which you are being almost tormented, poked, or prodded in a prolonged sense. So it's
Hmm.
not a momentary thing that just happens and then doesn't repeat itself. Bullying is truly a repetitive action by another person towards you that happens over and over and over again, that you're not seeing any end to it. Like, this person continues to go after you, whether it's
Hmm.
verbally, meant, whatever it is. And so I think it's good, as bullying's become a big buzzword and it's used for a lot of things now,
Hmm.
to understand truly what does it mean. And then if you're experiencing a situation where somebody did something and it was a one-time thing and it was incredibly traumatic for you, whether it was emotional, mental, physical, that in itself absolutely has to be dealt with. You have to go to somebody, you have to let them know what's happened and what's going on, because you
Hmm.
don't want it to repeat itself. But in those circumstances, typically that's more called an isolated incident, an incident
Hmm.
in which something traumatic has taken place. When it's bullying, when it's been repeated once, twice, 3 or 4 times with the same person, you have to speak up, even if they feel like
Hmm.
very small things, because sometimes it's just about getting a third party involved. It's not always about, because maybe they're small things, but they've been super
Hmm.
hurtful to you. When you can get that adult or that parent or that teacher or somebody else involved to come into that situation, sometimes there is a root cause and sometimes there is something that can be resolved to stop it. But the more that we let it perpetrate and go on and go on and go on, and we don't talk to somebody, that is when sometimes it can get very, very, very out of control. And then we can really fall into victim mode. We never want to fall to victim. We always want to stay inside the ability to affect change in our own life. And by
Hmm.
doing that, we always stand in the driver's seat. Nobody else is going to control us. Nobody else is going to make me the victim. I
Hmm.
am going to always be proactive. I'm going to be my best advocate. I'm going to stand up. And when I feel like I can't, I'm going to go to somebody who will use their voice to stand up on my behalf. But I am
Yes.
not going to let someone else have control over who I am and the outcome of my mental health and the outcome of my physical health. That is, you have ownership of your own body, of your own mental health, and never let anybody come in and affect change there where you don't advocate for yourself.
Yes. My next question is, do you think students at first try and avoid the fact that they're being bullied or hide it? And if so, why? And how can we counter this stigma that it comes with being bullied or having mental health issues?
Oh, such a good question. Yes, I think that probably the number one word I would use for why we might do that would be shame. I think that we often go to places of shame and shame makes us it brings us very inside ourselves because it makes us want to hide. Shame
Mhm.
feels like something that you don't want to put out in front of anybody else because we feel there's a chance I could be judged. There's a chance somebody could second guess or question me. There's a chance that if I speak up or say something, maybe it could get worse.
Mhm.
All of these things surround oftentimes bullying situations, and or a mental health situation where we're experiencing a lot of depression or sadness. We feel that sense of shame. And I think one of the greatest things we need to understand, especially through our growth in elementary, middle, high school, is that these are not shameful feelings. These are human feelings. These are feelings that we all feel, that we all go through.
Mhm.
And the power of your vulnerability to speak to that person that you know that you can trust. And again, because you have ownership of your own mind and your own body, it is up to you to determine who you feel is a safe place for you. And when you know someone isn't safe, even if they're showing a little bit of compassion towards you, if you know that's not a safe person, steer yourself to that safe person because the
Mhm.
knowledge of who you are and what you've gone through should be protected. And it should be
Yeah.
with somebody that you truly trust. And so finding that person, knowing who that person is, and if you don't know, go to that guidance counselor, go to that parent, pick up a talk line and talk to somebody about it.
Mhm.
Those people will help direct you until you find that safe point for yourself. But I definitely think it's incredibly important that we speak up, that we
Mhm.
don't let shame take over. And because I think shame is that dark place that
Mhm.
we must turn the light on in. And when you feel like it's overtaking you, power to break that hold on you is through voicing what's going on and by opening up, because I promise you the minute you get to that right person, you're going to feel like someone turned a light on and it's going to be amazing. You're going to feel that shame just, it's literally going to wash away. And
Mhm.
it's also the power of vulnerability. If you've never read any of Brene Brown's materials, I highly recommend them because she
Mhm.
talks a ton about vulnerability and shame. And I think they're the top two reasons why people stay quiet inside bullying and mental health issues.
Yes. I know that you've touched on this a little bit, like having a safe space and a right person, but who do you recommend reaching out to for support when needed?
I would always start with mom and dad. I know not everyone has a great relationship with their parents, and I fully understand that. So evaluate that and evaluate, is mom and dad, a good and safe place to go? If they're not, for whatever reason, it shouldn't be, okay, well, now there's nobody, because we are in school. We have extracurricular activities. It could be a coach. It could be a teacher. It could be a guidance counselor. It could be an aunt. It could be an uncle. It could be a grandparent. It could be, somebody who's come into your life in a trusted way where you've been able to watch them, have maybe a little bit of interaction with them to know that they are showing that compassion and that empathy towards you. If you see
Mhm.
somebody reaching towards you and you know that that's a safe and healthy person, so how do you evaluate a safe and healthy person? What's kind of the fruit of their own life? What are you
Mhm.
seeing them produce? Are they producing other healthy relationships? Are they
Mhm.
producing kindness and love in their wake after they interact with people? These are ways that we can evaluate, is a person going to be a healthy and safe person for me to come to? Because a lot of adults take
Mhm.
that same pain, never get a chance to deal with it, never get the tools, and they carry it straight into their adulthood. And
Mhm.
so they're still learning, but there's always someone. I promise you, there's always someone. And I would say, and it's not a last resort, because there are people that every single day, every hour of every single day, give of their time to get on the opposite end of these talk lines because
Mhm.
they believe that you are so valuable and so important that they're willing to take their own time out of their own day. And they have no idea who will dial that number, but they know how valuable and important you are. And so never hesitate to use one of those lines and to pick up and to talk to somebody. And that person will always help further direct you and evaluate. They can help you go through these people in your life and they can help you evaluate who might be the safe person to go to.
Yes, definitely. My next question is, are there any other projects that you're involved with regarding bullying or helping others? And if so, what are they?
Our biggest project right now, which really just takes all the time, is our film. We've taken the stage show that we toured with and we have turned it to film. And in partnership
Mhm.
with the Justin Simmons Foundation, we have been able to produce it in sort of a Broadway style way. It looks a little
Mhm.
bit like the way Hamilton was filmed on Disney Plus.
Mhm.
And the great part of that is that it's allowed us the scalability of getting this program to a national level, to get it to literally thousands and thousands of schools, to impact millions of students. And that's truly our goal. And because that takes such a great deal of focus, because just getting schools to know that it exists, what it is, and what makes it unique and valuable to them, and how it can be highly effective to students, there's only right now 3 or 4 of us on our staff. So, I mean, that is
Mhm.
all day, every day. That's what we get to do. And so,
Mhm.
do we believe there will be more? Absolutely. So, our long term goal is that we can have more films and more things available. Eventually, we would love to have 4 different programs available so that schools could choose to
Mhm.
use them throughout the middle school years and throughout the high school years. But every year they would have something of value to deliver to their students that talks about mental health
Mhm.
and or the topic of bullying.
Yes, that sounds amazing.
Yes, we're
My next
excited.
my next question was, what is your message to teens to help them with mental health issues and bullying?
Um, I would simply say that I believe the most powerful tool that lives in what we do inside the schools is the tool of speaking life, because I really believe that the power to change your situation lives inside the words and the actions that you choose every single day. So we know that every single day when we open our mouth, one of 2 things will come out. It will be life-giving, or it can produce death in the life of somebody else. That is a lot of power. And it's a
Mhm.
power that every single one of us hold every single day in every single conversation. It doesn't matter if it's the conversation with mom in the kitchen in the morning or it's the first person you talk to on the bus when you go to school. Every single conversation, every single moment of your life can be significant. And what we don't want is that those moments end up being significant in the life of somebody else in a way that's detrimental. And
Mhm.
I don't think we intend that, but that is why we are each responsible for our own actions. And I want to just say that I truly believe that teens within themselves have the power to change this.
Mhm.
All we're here for is to support you and enable you with the tools that you need to do that, because the power that lies within you to change this situation is something that myself as an adult, as a mom, I can't affect that same change with your peers. So the
Mhm.
statistics tell us that when a bullying incident occurs and somebody intervenes, that incident will end within 10 seconds. But an
Oh wow.
even better statistic than that is that when that person that intervenes is a peer, that bullying will end permanently. That's power.
Mhm.
And that's the power that each of you have as teenagers to affect change in the lives of the people around you. And I think when we rise in our power and we realize the power we have to affect good in the world simply through the things that we say and do in our interactions with others, because here's the reality: if we all spoke life, if we all walked out speak life actions every
Mhm.
day in the interactions we have with other people, naturally bullying would just end. It would
Mhm.
end because there's nothing being perpetrated that's negative.
Mhm.
So that's the simplicity of the power of your words and your actions. And I will say this: maybe I, Rebecca Bird, can't end bullying for every single child across the
Mhm.
world, but if I can speak life into the person I get to talk to next, and I get to talk to next, and I get to talk to next over the course of my life, I could change that for hundreds of people. And if we
Mhm.
each did that, that's when we see millions upon millions of lives that are impacted and changed, because we each have a part to play, not in the lives of one person, but we each have a part to play in the lives of hundreds of people that we're going to
Yeah.
interact with over the course of our life.
Yes. I know you just mentioned the power that teens can have to stop this. So I was wondering, what do you think is the best way to get teens and students to engage in this conversation about bullying and mental health issues?
Well, one of the things that we've loved about the film is, I think one of the hardest things is vulnerability. When we're going through formidable times of change and self-discovery, it's really hard to be vulnerable.
Mhm.
It's hard to tell our story. And one of the things that we've discovered is that through the film, instead of me having to say, hey, Nira, what are you experiencing today? What's really hard for you? That may be a hard thing to divulge. But if
Hmm.
instead I said to you, hey, Nira, what character in the film did you relate to? What stories really spoke to you that you were like, oh, I feel that. I've experienced that. Now you're going to tell your story, but you're going to actually tell the character's story. And as you
Hmm.
talk about that character, whoever that was, it could have been one of the main characters, it could have been somebody else. But as you begin to tell that story, all of a sudden, there's permission granted to yourself and to the person that you're speaking to begin to open up and to begin to have a really important conversation that needs to be had. And in a
Yes.
way that's not super threatening. And I think that that's important both in school that we're having those conversations, but it's also why we send the film home. Because I really
Hmm.
believe that if kids have a mechanism of something that they could sit down and watch with their parents, and at the end of it, most parents are going to turn and look at their child and say, hey, do you relate to anything that we just saw? Like, do you have experiences like that?
Hmm.
Can you imagine the important conversations that could come from that simple question? So many
Yes.
things could be talked about that otherwise maybe would never have come up and never have been spoken about. So I think that's the biggest thing is we have to create the ability for students to have these conversations in a non-threatening way and in a way that they feel that they are not the only one that's feeling it, going through it. Because when we know that we're not alone, there's so much more permission that we give ourselves to tell our story and to experience our story. So I think that is really the key to getting the conversation going is how do we cultivate that in a safe, non-threatening way that allows students the opportunity to know it's okay. It's okay to tell your story. And also, you're not alone. We're all
Yes.
facing this in some way.
Yes. It's definitely probably best to take smaller steps towards getting there since it's hard to just come right out of the gate and share everything that's going inside of us, like in our lives.
100%. And I think that's why it can't just be a one-time conversation. It has to be something
Yes.
that's ongoing because it's trust, right? We
Hmm.
shouldn't just divulge and everything to
Hmm.
somebody. We give them a little bit of ourselves and we watch and we wait and maybe a little bit more and maybe a little bit more until we know that this is a trustworthy person in a trustworthy situation. And
Hmm.
thank goodness for most of us, there's at least one parent or one grandparent or one aunt or one uncle, but there's somebody that's around us that truly does care and is truly open and willing to have those conversations with us. And we need to have them. We need to have
Yes.
them because we need to know that we're not alone.
Yes. My next question is, how does screen time and social media impact students' mental and emotional health? And how do you think cyberbullying and social media fits into all of this?
Whew. I mean, when I was in school, I would say the biggest difference is that for me and my entire generation, if a bullying incident took place and it took place in school or in an extracurricular activity or even at a family event, wherever it
Hmm.
took place, at some point you could go home. At some point you could get away from that situation and close the door of your bedroom and have some safety from it, have a break from it, have the ability to mentally, emotionally recover or process, or even to have that opportunity to find that safe person to have that conversation with. Um, it's just not like that anymore. What you
Hmm.
guys face is entirely different because a good majority of the abuse is taking place online. And even if it took place in person, even if an incident took place in it just perpetrates online
Hmm.
because whether it was recorded and put out there in a way through a picture or through a video, or it was just, this is a person who's targeted me. They target me at school and now they're targeting me online.
Hmm.
And then it also allows a mob mentality of social media where
Yes.
a lot of other people just jump on board and a child could be overcome in a very short period of time by negativity. I mean, goodness, one post could deliver so many comments that within minutes it could
Hmm.
become too much. And so this is just a whole new arena. And we're seeing it. We're seeing the results of what the screen time and the social media and all those things are having on your generation.
Hmm.
And we're seeing that mental health, is escalating. The issues are escalating. Suicide numbers are escalating.
Mm-hmm.
post-COVID even more so, because you guys were trapped inside
Yes.
your homes for such a long period of time. You were devoid of the actual interpersonal relations that we're supposed to be having outside of a screen. Those were
Mm-hmm.
removed from you. And so now the mental health struggles and the loneliness factor that perpetrated itself throughout COVID, for many people is not over. You know,
Yes.
COVID didn't necessarily stop those feelings or those emotions. And so I think that we're just at a point where it's crisis mode. When you add social media and you add the environment in which we face today because of screens, I think we're dealing with a crisis situation, and it has to be addressed with that kind of, um, we need to address it the same way we just saw the hurricane take away so many homes and so many people's livelihoods. Everybody comes to try and serve that because it is a crisis situation. Well, I
Mm-hmm.
would say that based on what I have seen, we should be doing the same thing when it comes to the mental health of students. We should all, as adults, as parents, as schools, be seeing the crisis that stands in front of us, and we should all be rallying around to bring as many tools and as much support as we possibly can for teens today.
Yes, and I know you just touched on this a little bit, but I was wondering, how do you think we should address this issue with technology in order to help students' well-being so they can use social media and the internet properly to avoid being cyberbullied or participating in it?
Yeah, I think that as parents, one of our jobs is certainly to not open up the opportunity for social media and smartphones as early on as I think many do. And I think on
Mm-hmm.
behalf of parents, I would say you just think you're doing the kind thing. You think that
Mm-hmm.
you're giving your child something that they really want. They feel maybe disconnected because they're the one that doesn't have the phone. And so you
Mm-hmm.
think that you're doing something to help them feel included.
Mm-hmm.
And yet at the same time, when you are learning yourself and you're trying to understand, being handed a phone is like, handing a bomb to somebody who has no idea how to handle it.
Mm-hmm.
It could go off at any minute and it could be incredibly detrimental. And so I think as parents, that's the first thing. When should a child have a smartphone? The second is, when should they have a social media account? And
Mm-hmm.
I think the longer you can wait on both of those, I mean, that is my top pieces of advice, because can you really navigate even with the safety controls that they put on these smartphones? Not really, because kids are
Mm-hmm.
super smart and they figure out if I can't get it this way, I can get it this way. And again, they're not searching to do something that's negative. They're looking for connection. And so
Mm-hmm.
they feel like when parents put these controls and these blocks on it, they feel like, oh, I'm missing out. I'm missing out on connection. But
Mm-hmm.
really, truly, we need to put safety measures in place.
Mm-hmm.
So I think, and I would also say to parents, these kind of conversations, stay on top of it. Who are your kids talking to online? Who
Mm-hmm.
are, take those phones, take a look at what's going on, not to invade their privacy, but to make sure that somebody hasn't invaded their world that you're unaware of, and saying and doing things in the same way that we would if we vetted a friend going to a neighbor's house. Wouldn't
Mm-hmm.
you want to know who's that neighbor? Who's that friend
Mm-hmm.
they're hanging out with? What are those people like? That's the phone. The phone is the neighbor. The phone is the person's house they're going over. It's the
Mm-hmm.
person they're spending the time with. In the same way as a parent, we do that for people in person. We need to be thinking the same way with a phone. And I think lastly, I would encourage a teen that you never have to be held hostage by that phone. You can
Mm-hmm.
always use your off button. You can always shut down that account. You can always walk away. Do not allow people, or this false sense of, that this is where all the connection's going to live. If it is not healthy, shut the phone off, shut down the account, walk away from the situation. Even if it's for a season, give yourself a month, detox yourself from that, and
Mm-hmm.
allow your brain to function inside clarity and not
Mm-hmm.
confusion, and then make a better decision based off of a break and off of some time spent away from it. But I think it's something, even as an adult, we have to constantly be monitoring and navigating. And I highly encourage breaks and detoxing and limiting the amount of time that you're spending in the world of screens, social media, and all of that.
Yes, definitely. My next question is, we know that students come from different family backgrounds, and how do you believe that can impact their well-being? And what can we do to help all students, no matter the background that they come from?
I mean, our background is kind of like our DNA. You know, it's sort of
Hmm.
the what we were born with, and we don't get to choose it. It is the world we've been born into. It's the family in which we were raised. And so I think that the biggest thing would be going back to what we talked about a little while ago in regards to never consider yourself or place yourself in a place of victimhood. If
Hmm.
there's something difficult that you have faced and you have walked through, which almost everybody has something, but some of us so much more than others,
Hmm.
have gone through some very difficult things. There's always help and there's always resources. And when we can take even the negative things that have happened to us that we didn't have control over, and we can get the help and the resources and the tools that we need to find the healing that must take place following those situations or the traumatic things we may have walked through, there can be so much greatness on the other side. My chronic illness took me 30 years, 17 of which was just finding my diagnosis. The next
Hmm.
2 decades was treatment, and it was an incredible season of suffering. And there was times where I didn't think I'd make it through. There was times I didn't think I'd survive, but I did because I never quit and I never gave up and I never allowed my circumstances to define the outcome of my life. And
Hmm.
so I would absolutely say to students that are struggling, that are coming from places that they cannot control, to speak up and speak out about what's going on. Never let those things continue to happen to you without using your voice and saying something about them. And then if you're on the other side of them, if you come through them, seek
Hmm.
out those healing resources, seek out those tools. I know that healing is hard and painful, and it means sometimes we have to go back to painful places, but it's so worth it because just like you've said, how does it equate mental health down the road? Unfortunately,
Hmm.
we can't take hard circumstances and just stuff them down or try to push them back in our memory till they're gone. We have
Hmm.
to deal with them. But when we deal with them, when we go through the hardship of the process of dealing with that pain and we receive the healing that's going to come when we walk that out, oh my goodness, the outcome is that all those mental health repercussions don't have to live on in your life. Like you
Hmm.
can have freedom from those things and you can have an amazing outcome on the other side. So I would just encourage students that are going through those things, because will they affect your long-term outcome? Yes. If we don't deal with them, they will. So we have to deal with those things head on. And there can be an amazing outcome on the other side.
Hmm. Yes. And my last question is, how should we encourage not only teens, but also parents, friends, educators, and administrators and others to feel comfortable about seeking help and assistance when it's needed? And how can we help them reach help before issues become too serious?
Mm. So important. Um, I think if we thought about mental health for what it truly is, um, instead of the stigmas that sometimes surround it, if if you injured your knee and you had pain and you continued to limp day after day after day, eventually that problem, whatever's under the surface causing that limp, is going to get worse, and it's going to
Hmm.
get even worse and worse and worse. And eventually you may not even be able to walk.
Hmm.
And I think our mental health is the same. It's a part of our physical being. We are body,
Hmm.
soul, mind, and spirit. It's how we were created. All things function together. And so when our mental health is limping along and it's not doing well, and yet we refuse to go to the doctor and we refuse to talk to anybody about it, because whether it is that shame or that stigma or whatever it is that surrounds it, eventually when it begins to spiral and get worse and worse and worse and worse, and we find ourselves in a much more difficult place, the undoing of that and the healing of that is going to often take so much longer, and it's going to be so much harder. And so
Hmm.
I would encourage you that if right now you feel like you're limping, if right now you feel like, man, I've got a little bit of this going on and a little bit of this going on, and it all feels hard and it feels like it's starting to compound,
Hmm.
notice it. And when you notice it, know that you are valuable enough to reach out and to get that help that you need. And the sooner that you do, the sooner that the healing and the help and the tools are going to come to you. And you never have to have that difficult or terrible outcome on the other side, because you've reached out and you've resourced the things that you need. And man, I have talked to people. I've done a lot of the physical work, and
Hmm.
now I'm sort of walking into some of the emotional stuff myself, but I am now getting the privilege of coming into relationship with people who've spent so much time doing that kind of hard work.
Hmm.
And man, they are powerful people. They are
Mhm.
strong and powerful people, and they're people who've been through so many traumatic and difficult things in their life, things they didn't choose, things that happened to them. And so I would just encourage you that you don't need to limp. You can
Mhm.
fly. You can fly. And there is so much ahead of you. Never let anyone shame you or make you feel badly about what you're feeling or what you're struggling with. Bring it into the light, find that help, and soar, because there are
Mhm.
so many things that you are meant to do. And this is a part of your story, and it's a part of your story that it's going to be really powerful because you're going to
Yes.
help so many other people as you get to the other side of that healing. But you're valuable, and fight for that healing, get that healing, and advocate for yourself, because you have greatness waiting on the other side of that.
Yes, definitely. Thank you so much for your time. I really appreciated you answering my questions.
Absolutely, Nira. I'm so excited for what you're doing. You are truly embodying everything that we hope teens will do, to literally just step out and be super courageous, use your voice on behalf of so many other kids, and you're going to affect so much change through what you're doing, because again, this is peer to peer what you're doing. And so
Mhm.
the power that you have to affect change is unbelievable.
Thank you so much.
I hope you feel so encouraged and so empowered, and we are with you all the way, whatever we can do to help.
Thank you so much. Thank you. I really appreciate that. I'm
Absolutely.
going to stop the recording really quickly.